Good evening and welcome to Education Number One Priority. Today's topic is going to be about public broadcasting. Little do we know sometimes that we have about 118 million Americans who tune in to public broadcasting every month, and 3.7 million listen to the radio. And locally, we have a public broadcasting system here as well as radio. And of course, as you know, Education Number One Priority is an educational show, and it is a public broadcasting system as well. Welcome to Education Number One Priority.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And Don Dunlap, President and General Manager of KEDT. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, you could say I haven't come very far because I graduated from Ray High School right across the street.
Okay.
And now we're building a broadcast center only about 300 yards from where I went to high school. So I guess in my class I probably come the least distance of any of our graduates. But I'm a local guy, born in Robstown, Texas, and went to school here in Corpus Christi. Went to Sam Houston Elementary, Baker Junior High, Ray High School, Delmar College, and Texas A&I down in Kingsville at the time.
So basically your roots are from the local area.
I'm about as local as I get.
I was going to say, and a public broadcasting system reaches out to the local community.
Yeah.
Great fit there. You know, our particular KEDT was founded October 16th of 1972, and with used equipment. Why? Why on earth begin something that television was already going on, people had a chance to turn on those television stations? Why begin a local broadcasting system?
Well, at that time, there were 3 stations on the air here, the ABC, CBS, and NBC.
Right.
And public television stations were cropping up across the country. And they were in most of the major cities and a number of smaller cities too. A group of people headed up by Charles Budd, who with the H-E-B grocery store, decided that Corpus Christi needed one because at that time in the early 70s, Corpus Christi was the largest community in the United States that didn't have a public TV station here. So they in partnerships with local school districts, raised the money to buy a defunct commercial station out of Alvin, Texas, that had gone bankrupt and had been repossessed by General Electric, who was in the television broadcast equipment business at that time, and they hold the paper on this whole television station up in Alvin. So this group raised about $400,000, bought an entire television station worth of equipment, and started hiring some local people, including me, and we moved that station down here to Corpus Christi and put it on the air in an old school building downtown, the old Cheston Heath School Building, which is where the county courthouse is now.
Okay.
In fact, we had been on the air for only about 6 months, and you know, we didn't have a nickel to our name. Nobody knew what UHF television was, much less commercial, non-commercial television. So one day we get a condemnation notice from the county that they wanted that old school building for to build the courthouse on, and they give us about 6 months to get out of there. And so we looked around town, and on the south side of town, a strip center was developing, Office Plaza, Commerce One complex, and we said, well, we'll temporarily move into that facility over there until we can find something different. So kind of our in-house joke, we've been in our temporary facility for 41 years, but we're about to change that.
You're about to change that, but 41 successful years. You know, when you said, because I know it began here in 1972, but public broadcasting began in 1969, so really Corpus Christi, Texas wasn't far behind that curve.
No, they weren't. You know, the Public Broadcasting Act was one of LBJ's Great Society pieces, and in fact, one of the crafters of that was a fellow named Bill Moyers, who went on to host and produce a ton of public television programs through the years. You know, some of the best documentaries ever produced were produced by Bill Moyers.
Why is public broadcasting important?
I think it's important to the community because of the fact of what we focus on. Commercial broadcasters, really their constituency are advertisers and businesses. About 4% of everything that you buy on average has advertising money in it that increases the cost of that product by about 4%. So, you know, I tell people, well, you may not support public television, but you support every commercial television station in the market here, because the cost of that advertising is added onto the food that you buy, the clothes you buy, and even the cars you buy. If you buy a car in this town, use about $1,200–1,300 of that car is advertising money that you're paying, that they ran to get you to buy that car. So people pay for all television and radio, whether it's commercial or non-commercial. We're a little bit different. We can't, we don't command that that money. It's given to us by our donors. We have over 5,000 families that are supporters of the KEDT and a number of local businesses and foundations. We also raise a lot of money from grants outside of the community that brings money into this community, that has a stimulus effect too, that we turn into programs and we buy equipment with and build new facilities like we're doing right now with.
Well, I think that speaks to the fact that people, local control again, deciding here's what we want to see, here's what we'd like to do. And the fact that, you know, monthly 118 million people listen to public broadcasting, that really does send a very strong message about how important it is.
And that's why we also have, you know, about 11% of the funding for public broadcasting comes from a federal government grant program. It's a matching grant program, so if you don't raise any money locally, you don't get any. And it's also now, in the last 20 years, been focused mainly on the smaller communities, because if you look at it, the cost of broadcasting programs with the transmitters and all that stuff is exactly the same as if you have 300,000 people or 3 million in the same market. Same equipment, same power bill, same amount of staff. So the 11% of money that funds public television mostly goes now to the smaller markets like Corpus Christi.
I think when you were sharing with me about, you know, commercial television stations, and we pay for that, you know, basically a public broadcasting system is a nonprofit.
We are a 501c3.
That's exactly correct. And some people may not realize that. And so again, it goes back to the fact that the station's not there to make money, but to serve people as well. As I reviewed the history of the station, I noted it had its ups and downs, and I think you've told us about some of those ups and downs in terms of having to move from a building, having to go moving to temporary quarters. But what else has occurred?
Well, you know, my first boss in public television, Mr. Terrell Cass, who is a good friend of mine and one of my mentors, he had a saying after being in this market for a while, you know, everybody in Corpus Christi is in the oil business whether they know it or not. And a lot of those cycles that you talked about, that the station has gone through, that school districts have gone through, has evolved around this commodity of oil and gas and the ups and downs of that, going from $80 down to $16 a barrel in the 80s when everything just turned off overnight. And, you know, we're seeing a transaction in that right now too, with oil going probably down in the 20s this coming year.
Well, I think that's why this is important to ask, because being a nonprofit, you rely on donors, you rely on the economy of the public that you're serving. And so you will have those ups and downs on there. But then again, now let's turn to some quality programs, because I think people don't realize, like Sesame Street and some of those all began through public broadcasting as well.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people are under the misconception that we get those programs free. Programming cost is our largest single cost that we have. Every year we will spend about $600,000 a year buying television programming from PBS and, I don't know, probably 25 other different distributors. There's a whole marketplace for public television, and to be relevant to individual communities, really no two public television stations have the same programming. And so we try to buy programs from the marketplace that are, we think are the most relevant to this. And to kind of measure that, one of the things that we do that no other television station does is we send out ballots to all of our supporters and members that have different programs, and we check their interest, and then a lot of times we can see a shift over time. Okay, we need to add more children's program or more how-to programs or more science programs, and so we go to the marketplace with our dollars that are raised from this community and purchase those programs. On the radio side, we spend about $200,000 a year buying public radio programs, and NPR is the biggest distributor, but we buy them from a number of other distributors as well. And KEDT is the smallest community-owned public radio and TV station in the country. And that may be good for bragging rights, but when it comes to paying the bills, it's you know, it's always a struggle. We're a very small station. We have 19 employees. Channel 3 has 101 employees. So and Channel 610 operation is probably about the same, between 90 and 100. So we're about 1/5 the size, and we're operating a radio and television station too. So
you have a lot of volunteers as well.
We live on volunteers.
Yes.
And I tell you, that is one thing that still impresses me about this community, even after doing this nonprofit work for over 40 years, is just the commitment to a number of people in this town that they will commit hours and hours of their time to come and volunteer with that. That's very humbling to us, but we couldn't do it without it. Our largest single fundraiser every year is our annual television auction, and during the course of that, we'll have between 800 and 900 different volunteers come out. Isn't that say something about this community?
Well, it's just a great deal about our community. It's just a great deal about the importance of the public broadcasting system here in our community as well. And that's why I wanted to do this particular segment with you, to talk about that. Because from your temporary quarters, now you have a permanent quarters, and that is the partnership with Del Mar College, specifically at the Development Economic Center. So let's talk about that. How did it come to be? How did it evolve?
We've had for many, many years a close working relationship with Del Mar College, and Del Mar folks are great to work with. They're local people, locally elected people, and I tell you, the employees and the Board of Regents, they love this college. And I know why. As an alumni and graduate of this school, they really provide a fantastic service for this community that touches you in about any business you go into. There are people working there that got an education from Del Mar College. So a number of years ago, in the early 2000s, KEDT was faced with an unfunded federal mandate. Now, you never appreciate one of those until you had one of those things. And that was a mandate by the FCC for every television station in the country to convert from analog television to digital television. That was nearly a $5 million transition for KEDT.
Okay.
More than twice our annual operating cost. And we started to look at how we could do that and who in the community could value from that besides just us. And we explored a lot of different avenues, and really, we had Bud Harris, who was the dean here of Del Mar College, on our board of directors, and we started looking at the college's kind of strategic direction they were going with communications and media, what we needed for the future, and it became apparent that through the work we'd done on that digital conversion, that they needed new resources in the form of television production and media communications, more and more courses. We're going to have video elements to it. We saw a need for more community-based programs. So ultimately that led to us forming a partnership, a mutually beneficial partnership between Del Mar and KEDT. Del Mar also had a small portion of land that they really had no use for other than having to mow. Okay. So it wasn't really an asset to them. It was about the size for us to build a building on. So we entered into a long-term lease with the president and board of regents, and KEDT launched a capital campaign of about $4.8 million, which we're at about 87% funded right now. It's coming along real nice. And we've built that. It's going to save Del Mar College nearly $2 million in having to reinvest in digital equipment. It's going to reduce KDT's operating cost getting out of the current lease that we're in of over $200,000 a year. So it's a win-win thing. And unlike very seldom do you have a capital campaign for a nonprofit that at the end of it, what they build actually reduces their operating cost. Right. Usually it increases it, like the Texas Gate Aquarium doing this fantastic project, but their operating costs will increase along with it. Ours will decrease at this, which will give us a couple $100,000 more to put into programming. So it's a win-win for Del Mar, it's a win-win for us. And I tell you, Dr. Escamilla is a real visionary, as well as the Board of Regents, on how to do things. This is really the first example of a partnership like this in public television in the country.
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about it, because a local community college with a public broadcasting system that is attuned to the local community, what a better fit than that? Yeah,
there's 4 types of public television stations. The state networks like Oklahoma, South Carolina, North Carolina, and they'll have a whole network around there. Those are usually a Department of Education for a state. You might have been around some of those in your travels too. There are a number of them state university and college licensed public radio and TV stations. And then there are just a few governmental entities and local groups, like a couple of Catholic dioceses have some public radio and TV stations. And then the 4th type is about 1/3 of the public stations, and those are 501c3 local nonprofit organizations, local board of directors, and Texas is one of only 5 states that has no funding for educational television. Yep. We're wrestling with how we fund education, period, but one of 5 states that does fund public television, educational television.
Well, I think it goes back to the importance of public broadcasting. And I think if we had more time, we'd talk about that public broadcasting is not exclusive to the United States.
Nope.
Because it began in England, much sooner than ours, and that's sort of the model that we've gotten from. All right, now let's talk about how and you mentioned a little bit about that, but how will the program be enhanced with the relocation to Del Mar? You talked about cost savings, but how will the program be enhanced? You'll have some more dollars for programming, but what else?
We will also have a number of assets that we don't have now. For example, out in front of the building, we're going to have an outdoor performance plaza with a stage all wired up with for cameras, microphones, lighting, where we can do live concerts and different kind of presentations outdoors there. Focus on local music groups, and we're having a groundbreaking in April, a whole week worth of events for the community, and we're going to have a number of outdoor concerts over there that people will be invited to and free to come in and see what we're doing and tour the new facility. Also inside in the radio section, we're really put a lot of effort into enhancing our public radio efforts. Here too, we're going to have kind of state-of-the-art streaming capabilities and social media operations there. We're going to we have an indoor performance studio in the radio area where we can bring in string quartets and feature, for example, the music department from Del Mar College students and professors. Maybe have like a Wednesday afternoon concert by Del Mar students in there. There's very little live music on radio anywhere anymore. That was how radio started, but now everything is canned. Most radio stations don't even have a news department anymore. We do have a news department, only one in town. Okay. And so we plan to increase our news programming and want to work with the journalism department with Del Mar College, Texas A&M Kingsville, Texas A&M Corpus Christi to enhance that and give some opportunities for these journalism majors to kind of work in a real world environment. It's really a difference in these colleges and universities to be in a communications class where they have, it's more of a lab setting. Right. But they're not faced with the operational pressures of a broadcast station. Everything has to be here on time, everything has to start on time, and all those pressures for that. They think in terms of, college and universities tend to think in terms of semesters. We think in kind of hours of the day. And so that those kind of pressures will be great for students to work around and to be aware of, because that's exactly the world they're going to be working in. They're not going to be working in a kind of a lab type setting. So to be interfaced with our people that have had, working in broadcast careers for years will help them. And then for us to get some more assets from those students, sharp students. We always gain from the internships that we do. So we're looking forward to that.
Well, as you're visiting, my mind is going, I'm thinking several things. And first, let's just focus on the facility itself, because I heard several things that you talked about. Outside concerts, inside as well. So let's just do a comparison first. From your temporary quarters to here, is it equitable in size? Is it larger? What's the difference?
It's going to be, our current location is about 14,000 square feet.
Okay.
But I tell the staff, we've got a great 1970s TV station, but it's not 1970 anymore.
Okay.
So it's laid out horribly for today's operation. Okay. Some rooms are too big and wasted space, other spaces are too small. So our new facility is going to have a lot more flexible space into it, a lot more open office concept. We visited over, and our architects visited over a dozen different facilities across the country that had been built in the last 5 years, trying to get steal the ideas from the people who have the best ones. Okay. So we employed a lot of the things that we're doing in this that have been tested in the last 5 years in new broadcast facilities, commercial and non-commercial.
Okay.
So it's going to be a lot more efficient laid out. One person could do multiple jobs in a much easier way here, and we'll have, for the first time, adequate parking to the number of people that come to some of our events here too, which we don't have in our current location. And finally, for the first time, we really will have adequate facilities in the radio station to really maximize what we do with our radio service, because our radio service, we have a transmitter here in Corpus Christi that covers these 12 counties, but we also have another transmitter in Victoria, Texas that covers 10 counties up there. So you can go from Sarita, Texas, listening to our radio station, then at about Victoria, switch over to our other radio station and pick it up almost to Houston. So we cover a large area of the Texas coast. We just haven't had the studio facilities really to maximize the programming side of that.
Okay. So basically then you will have the flexibility to do more things in a more efficient manner.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that outdoor theater. Where is that going to be exactly?
It's in the facing the parking lot here on the Center for Economic Development.
All right.
And We should be able to get several hundred people out there for outdoor concerts, receptions, and we just want to attract a lot of different kind of groups that kind of match our genre.
Well, it'll be local. You'll give exposure to people, and they'll have a venue where they can come and provide entertainment. So again, it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, and showcase local talent, which there is a lot of musical talent in this community.
Well, as I was going through your website and browsing it, I noticed that your programming reflected local talent. I noticed that you had Jim Maloney and a segment on his. I noticed you had a segment on gardening. I noticed when I pulled down your radio, some of the people that are there, a couple of people that I know myself. And I looked at your, so it is some of the programming that is there is not only that which you go and buy, but it is reflective of our community. So this segment piece that you're adding will be a new piece then, right?
Yeah, and it will also take us beyond just the broadcast.
Right.
It will also take us into local receptions, different groups and stuff that might be a totally non-broadcast function, but an event outside that will let people showcase what they're doing too.
Good. Now, you mentioned it also in the course of your response to that question. When will the public be able to see it? When is your grand opening, or when is it tentatively scheduled?
The week of April the 2nd through the 9th.
Okay.
And we're going to start off on the 2nd with a kind of event for the major donors that have contributed the money to our capital campaign, and then we're going to have a whole week of evening concerts, tours, gardening demonstrations, cooking demonstrations, to culminate on a Saturday with a whole family and kids day with characters from different children's programs on public television, and different readings and all kind of activities for kids, games and contests and things.
It sounds like that week you want to give the community a flavor of what public broadcasting is all about.
We want to try to touch kind of every different kind of group in the community of their special interest, and kind of show them what we have to offer.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being and enlightening us about KEDT and what it does for our community.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
This has been Dr. Mary Jane Garza, Education #1 Priority.